So it's no secret that I didn't like Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, so I decided to write a better sequel to The Last Jedi, or at least I hope it's better. I mean, this is like a first draft, there may be some inconsistencies, some plot holes, and other issues like that. But in any case, I decided to write a sequel that I feel would be more fitting, more closer to what my vision of what an episode 9 would look like. Honestly, this is like one of the hardest videos I've ever had to record, mainly because I'm kind of on a script, I'm kind of not. I'm trying to make it more off the cuff, so it's kind of easier for me to do because it is exhausting on my chest when I try and read a script directly. It is just I don't know why, it's just exhausting. But anyway, let's get on with what I would have done for an episode 9. So I want to make it quite clear right off the bat that this is quite far from like an action Star Wars film. Like this would be like the least action packed of any of the Star Wars films like ever. So that's something to keep in mind. So our first setting is on a planet that used to be green, but thanks to some mineral exploitation by the First Order and maybe the Empire before them, it's currently a complete wasteland shithole that nobody inhabits. But anyway, we see the Falcon land here, and we join Rey, Chewie, and Finn on a little fetch quest mission for a kyber crystal. If you don't know what a kyber crystal is, that is basically what's meant to go inside Rey's lightsaber so she can basically wield the lightsaber because the last one got completely destroyed. Anyway, the angle we're going for here is that this kyber crystal is in a cave on this planet, and Rey knows this because of the ancient Jedi text that she stole from Luke in the last episode. So she asks Finn and Chewie to stand guard because this is obviously First Order territory. They don't want to get seen, and if they do, they want to make sure that they have the upper hand. That's a little bit of foreshadowing for later, but that means Rey's effectively on her own inside this cave. She notices like a doorway on top of a ledge, so she uses her scavenging abilities to climb this rock face over to this door. And I'm thinking that the edge of this door frame has like some really foreboding like imagery on it. Think about the tapestry on Midsummer that basically plots out exactly what's going to happen. Except not really, that's not gonna be the case. This is more reflecting on things in the past, so it's kind of like a well, to this point, it was kind of predestination that you're here. So it kind of gives like this terrifying sense of not having control anymore, which is quite an interesting angle to go at. So anyway, Rey enters this doorway because she feels something calling to her, and obviously this thing is her kyber crystal. On the other side of this doorway, she goes into another open cave area where she spots two crystals glowing at the far edge of the cave. These are like some white crystals that are glowing at her. They're very small. So she walks over with absolutely no problem at all and picks them up. But wait, surely there's got to be something to add a little bit of conflict because you can't just have a quest for like a MacGuffin that ultimately leads to nothing, can you? So anyway, the moment she picks up these crystals, she gets a force vision. And this is a really vivid force vision, like she's standing right inside of this force vision. Anyway, she's suddenly, all of a sudden, in the middle of the same Jakku desert where she spent 14 years growing up. And this is not the place where she wants to be, obviously, because she spies her younger self the day that her parents abandoned her. Except instead of just seeing little snippets, she now sees the entire thing. And trust me, that is not a good thing, because what she is about to see will basically traumatize her completely. So anyway, her younger self is like, no, come back. And she's like reaching out her hand. But in panic, this younger version of Rey tries to pull back the ship with the force as it pulls away. But she does that a little bit too hard. She rips the engine out of this ship as it's trying to pull away. The ship obviously can't fly anymore because it's got no engine, so then it plummets and big explosion happens. Her parents are obviously dead. So there we have it. There's the first major twist. Rey ended up killing her parents. Now, you could ward this off as a complete accident, but then Rey looks to her younger self, and her younger self just seems completely indifferent, like a complete sociopath, almost like that was like pure dark side energy flowing through her in that moment. Like, she didn't care that she just killed her parents in that moment. But then obviously present day Rey is just completely traumatized by seeing that. Anyway, she gets warped back to present day. She looks at the crystals in her hands, and what do you know? They've actually changed color to reflect her true nature. Instead of the white they were beforehand, they have now turned a deep purple. And if you don't know what deep purple means, that's basically a perfect blend between red lightsaber and blue lightsaber, light and dark. So it basically means that she has an equal propensity to the light and dark sides of the Force. So anyway, now we revisit Chewie and Finn on the outside of the cave. They're just waiting for ages for Rey to come out. They're just vibing because Rey is taking forever in their perspective. But then the sounds of TIE fighters approaches the horizon. Chewie and Finn both look over the edge of their hiding space, and what do you know? There's like four two-person TIE fighters off in the distance, and two stormtroopers leave each TIE fighter when it lands about 100 meters away. Anyway, these stormtroopers, I want to try and humanize them as much as possible, so they're just going to be quipping about everyday things. I don't know, like how crap the food is in the stormtrooper barracks. I don't really know, that's just kind of placeholder dialogue there, but maybe in the second or third draft, we could flesh out that stormtrooper dialogue a little bit more. Maybe make it more relevant. Make it kind of like a Chekhov's gun type dealio. But anyway, that's irrelevant for now. One of these stormtroopers has great observational skills. This stormtrooper notices that there are 3 sets of footprints, one of which belongs to a Wookiee, and the First Order doesn't have any Wookiees, so this kind of makes this guy a little bit sus. He calls over to his stormtrooper friends, points out the Wookiee prints, and then they decide, hey, maybe we should go follow those. And of course, that means that Chewie and Finn have their cover blown. So a huge fight scene ensues, and the outcome of it ultimately is that 7 stormtroopers are instantly killed, but then there's an 8th one who's basically fatally wounded and dying, but he's not completely dead just yet. He calls out to Finn, or FN2187 as he knows him, and then Finn runs over to this stormtrooper, completely confused. But anyway, this stormtrooper elaborates while he's bleeding to death that the barracks, or a lot of the people in the stormtrooper barracks, look up to FN2187 as some kind of hero from defecting from the First Order. And it's with this that Finn starts to realize, hey, these guys are just like me, and I've been blasting them down without a second thought, and I think this would be a great start to Finn's arc, and it will really put him through some emotional turmoil as we get deeper into the story. This stormtrooper even removes their helmet, so we get a bit more of that humanity within them. But then the stormtrooper dies, because obviously he's fatally wounded. It just took a little bit longer for him to bleed out than the others. And obviously Finn is completely horrified. He's mortified, he's traumatized, whatever. Just any choice word that you want to use. And at this moment, quite conveniently, Rey exits the cave, and she's rattled by her own thing. I mean, Finn and Chewie don't know what happened in there, of course, but she does. So she's just rushing off to the Falcon, trying to isolate herself in the captain's quarters as quick as possible, and Finn and Chewie follow suit quickly afterwards. Anyway, we move on to the day in the life of Supreme Leader Kylo Ren. The important thing that you need to know at this point about Supreme Leader Kylo Ren is that he is cripplingly lonely. He's got absolutely no one. He thought he could have Rey, but then obviously she didn't want to join him as evil Supreme Leader Lord thing. And it's pretty clear at this point that he's regretting every single choice that he's ever made leading up to this point. He's basically just and he's basically just acting like a machine to live. He's eating beige nutrition bricks constantly. He's training to actual physical damage or injury with the Knights of Ren. And he's even avoiding his throne that he fought so hard to get hold of. He just sees it as this symbol of his isolation and his loneliness, so he just avoids his own throne. But then this is when Kylo Ren starts to link in with this story. He's in the elevator, just vibing in there, probably going to one of his First Order meetings, when he feels the exact same amount of pain that Rey did when she saw the Force vision that her parents died. He sees every single bit of the Force vision that she did, and the answer to why he saw this was because of their Force bond established in Episode 8, where they could basically Force Skype one another. So he sees every bit of the Force vision, and it traumatizes him just as much, even though he's seen it before. It takes him like a minute or two to snap out of it, but when he does, he looks up and there are a whole bunch of Imperial officers just waiting for him to get out the elevator. And he's like, wait, how many people saw this? So he mind tricks them, tells them that they saw absolutely nothing and to just get on with their day, and obviously because they're weak-minded and the plot needs to happen, they do. Anyway, the First Order meeting that I was talking about earlier, yeah, we actually get to see one of those in this initial Kylo Ren scene. And most of it is actually an argument between Kylo Ren and Hux, because the other officers are just snapping out the popcorn, just waiting for the drama to unfold. But basically, Kylo Ren's point of view is that they need to focus on more diplomacy and actually focus on getting the First Order to be an actual government. Obviously, Hux and the other higher up officers want the First Order to continue to be a massive war machine, and Hux even goes so far as to suggest that Kylo Ren let the girl kill Snoke, or let Rey kill Snoke. And that makes Kylo Ren pretty pissed off, so he force pushes Hux across the room right into the wall, and then dismisses the meeting in frustration, ultimately telling Hux to know his place. If you can't tell based on Hux's temperament as it is, that would make him pretty damn pissed off. Anyway, I failed to mention what the whole point of that meeting was, but effectively what it was is that the Falcon was actually spotted leaving this desolate, nearly dead planet that Rey found the Kyber crystal on. So they're debating why the Falcon was there. Hux is trying to argue that the Falcon being there was like an act of war and the Resistance are preparing to fight again and that they need to eliminate the Resistance. Anyway, we revisit the Falcon again. Chewie and Finn are in the cockpit of the Falcon, and a couple of Porgs as well. Chewie never actually dealt with that Porg infestation from Episode 8. He's gotten a bit of a soft heart about the Porgs that are vibing in his cabin. So, and Finn brings up how weird Rey's been acting lately. Even before the events of fetching the Kyber crystal, she's been acting really strange, and he doesn't know why that is. Chewie accidentally divulges a bit too much, saying that he dropped her off at the Supremacy before Crate, and that she came back completely miserable. Anyway, Finn's like, what the fuck? Like, what has she been hiding? Like, did she actually kill Snoke? Are the rumors true? But like, he mostly elaborates this among himself, but ultimately, based on like the information he does know and information that he's missing out on, he can't really piece anything together just yet. So he ultimately drops it. We check in on Rey now, who is an absolute mess. She's just locked herself inside the captain's quarters. She's just moping about what she saw, that she was the dark side entity that completely ended her parents' lives. But she doesn't really get much of a chance to mope on her own because the Force decides to be a complete dickhead and connect her to Kylo Ren again. Naturally, she's also really pissed at Kylo Ren for stubbornly sticking to the throne instead of joining her. So given how emotionally charged Rey is right now, she tries to argue with Kylo Ren that he's stubborn and that he's stuck to the throne, and then Kylo Ren argues back that she kind of left him for dead on the throne room floor, and then Hux almost cleaned him up. But then after a while, they kind of just vented their differences, and then they just fall into this completely painstakingly awkward silence. And then Rey just goes back to sulking in the corner. But then Ben brings up yep, I'm gonna call him Ben now. Ben brings up the fact that he felt her Force vision earlier. He saw exactly what she saw, and then asks her if she wants to talk about it. See, the Skywalkers are really good at talking to other human beings. I love it. But in essence, Rey actually does vent something to him, saying that she was indeed the one that killed her parents, and she feels like there's just too much darkness in her. But you know, Ben's surprisingly cool with it because he knows a thing or two about patricide, and he defends her by saying, "You know what? This isn't your fault. They were awful people, and they deserved every single bit of the pain and suffering she inflicted upon them, and that they don't deserve her sympathy because they were just vile people in general." And you know what? Rey finds that she can't actually argue with that. She's actually semi-convinced by his point of view, but that doesn't mean that she can't mope about it a little bit more. And we find out during the course of this relatively short Force conversation that Rey and Ben are starting to once again warm up to each other after that like kind of stalemate before Crate, which is exactly where we need them to be. Anyway, the Force decides to cut them off at this point because it just decides that it's done with them for the day. And then that's when Rey hears a knock on the captain quarters door. She opens the captain's quarters door and she finds Finn on the other side of it. He's like he's trying to be like the counselor type. He's like, "Look, I have no idea what's going on with you or what has been going on with you, but I hope you figure it out." So he's trying to be a good friend. He's trying his best, but he's not quite all the way there. But then he describes the reason that he's really there, and that's because the Falcon is about to break from hyperspace in about 5 minutes, and to get ready to leave the Falcon. And then sure enough, at some point, the Falcon disengages from hyperspace over this new planet that we've never seen before. This is the planet where the new Resistance base resides, and my vision for this base is that it has no rotational axis, or this planet has no rotational axis. So there's one side that always faces the sun no matter what, and then there's this side that always faces away from the sun no matter what, but then there's just this small middle ground, this small slither of temperate climates. That's where you get your rainforest. But on the other side, there's just violent deserts of different temperatures. But yeah, there's just a small middle ground. And I don't know, you could call that kind of foreshadowing for what I'm planning later on, but to be honest, I just thought a planet like that would be kind of cool, so I just added it. But anyway, the Falcon swoops along the canopy of this relatively thin jungle, and then it lands at the Resistance base, at the main hangar bay. The three of them, Chewie, Rey, and Finn, all leave the Falcon, and they are greeted with C-3PO and Poe Dameron. Poe's like sharing some friendly banter between Finn and him, because obviously they're good friends. He doesn't really know Rey all that well, so he doesn't really have that kind of rapport built up with her. But that's fine, she just keeps her outward appearance, just trying to give the impression that nothing terrible is happening inside her head. But yes, he tells them that General Organa, or Leia, is expecting them in the briefing room within the hour to debrief on their mission. Just say exactly what went on. Anyway, cut to said debriefing, we get to Rey, Finn, and General Organa. Chewie isn't there, he's just vibing at the Falcon like he usually does. But they're all standing at the briefing room table on base. Finn is just recounting the dilemma that he found himself in. He recalls the battle between the 8 stormtroopers and then the subsequent stormtrooper that basically said that FN-2187 is their hero on the barracks before dying. And then he explains how that event just completely rattled him, and he tells General Leia that he just can't keep going on like this. He can't just keep killing some people who were once his own comrades. It just doesn't feel right to him. General Leia Organa just kind of understands this. She says, good on you for being honest with yourself. And then she just dismisses him to find something on base to work on instead. But now Finn has walked out of the briefing room, it's literally just Leia and Rey alone, and it's kind of tense in this scene because we know what Rey is going through at this point, but we don't know whether or not Leia does. But she can sense something is up, and she asks Rey what exactly happened inside the cave. Rey doesn't really give an honest answer. She just bakes up a fresh batch of bullshit that she hopes will convince Leia enough to get all the way off her back. But anyway, Leia definitely knows she's lying still, but just decides to let her have the benefit of the doubt because it's obvious that Rey doesn't want to divulge exactly what happened. Ultimately, Leia just says, you know what, it's probably not any of my business, it's just Jedi business and all that stuff. And then at some point during the scene, like maybe while Finn is still in the room, we can see Leia wince at pain, like clutching her abdomen, because there's obviously some kind of like damage going on there, and that we don't yet know about. And we're actually gonna address Leia's weird pangs of pain that we see throughout the scene. But it's kind of like that little bit of foreshadowing right there. Anyway, we get the opportunity to see Rey in her natural habitat, training, just trying to lift different sizes of rocks. And she tries to channel the light side of the Force to lift this really big boulder. But she finds that she's unable to do it. So naturally she gets quite frustrated, and then that causes her to channel some of the darkness she experienced from earlier, and some of the darkness she experienced even earlier than that. And using her internal pain and rage, she's able to finally lift this boulder, and even completely shatter it into smaller boulders. Thankfully, none of them actually hitting her in the process. And she quickly comes to learn that channeling the dark side of the Force actually feels kind of good. Obviously, this is not the kind of place where we want Rey to actually be, because she's at risk of falling to the dark side, and we don't want Darth Rey. We really don't. But where exactly did Finn go in the midst of all that drama? So we see him in the cafeteria alongside Poe and Rose. They sit together at the cafeteria eating whatever it is that resistance fighters eat. Finn's talking about how he's getting away from field missions until he can just get his head right, and both the others at the table are really supportive of him. They're like, yeah, I think this is the right choice, you do you, bud. But then Rose offers him an on-base position as an assistant engineer with her. Finn says that he doesn't really have any experience working on machinery, and that he was just a former stormtrooper. But Rose says, nah, come on, we can teach you. I can teach you how to repair things. And then maybe after the war, that whole repairing thing might actually become super useful for you. Anyway, this whole mention of after the war gets Poe really, like, emotionally riled up. He says that he doesn't feel like he has any place outside of the war environment, and outside of the war isn't really something that he's ever thought about before. And obviously Rose and Finn are both supportive of him in kind back, saying that he'll figure something out when the time comes, and not to worry about it too much. This is kind of a hint about where all of their arcs will end up. Anyway, this is a bit of like a setup for what's to come later on, and even though it might feel like a divergent side plot that doesn't really add all that much, I assure you that it goes a long way in contributing to Finn, Poe, and Rose's arcs, because they are gonna diverge quite a long way from where Rey's is going to end up by the end. But now we need to go back to what the main villains are up to, the First Order. We visit space once again, just outside of the Crate system, where obviously the Battle of Crate took place, and where the Supremacy got completely severed in half. And we actually see this Supremacy still severed in half. It hasn't been blown up, it's just remained exactly how it was. So we see an inconspicuous Imperial shuttle enter the hangar bay of this completely destroyed ship, before we see Hux exit. And Hux has gone out of his way to land in the hangar bay of this destroyed ship. So he's obviously up to something. He leaves his imperial shuttle to go storm the halls of this supremacy, and it's clear at this point that he knows what he's looking for. He finds the old archives of the supremacy, rifles through them until he finds exactly what he needs. He extracts this data onto a data drive, and then when one of the stormtroopers looks over his shoulder to see what he's doing, he just shoots him in the head with the blaster. Let me just clarify, Hux shoots the stormtrooper in the head in the blaster, not the other way around. It's meant to show how this data he's extracting is hugely classified and that none of the stormtroopers can know what's on it. But anyway, we still don't know what this footage actually shows, but we know it's probably really bad news for Kylo Ren or the Resistance or whoever. But anyway, we see Hux pull out the data drive from the archives, and he's escorted back to the TIEs and the Imperial shuttles in the hangar, and they take back off of the Supremacy back to the Finalizer. That's their current flagship. But now we jump back to General Organa. We actually get to see what exactly is causing all that pain in her abdomen. She's in the medical examiner's office, who actually tells her that the extended exposure to the vacuum of space while you remember when the bridge was blown up on that ship in The Last Jedi and she got sucked out into space and that she saved herself? Well, apparently she sustained major organ damage from whatever that was. So the chances are that she's on her last few days. The medical examiner has absolutely no idea how she survived this long. But Leia just replies, well, I guess the Force willed it so. And that is exactly right. She's been channeling the Force to just keep herself alive for as long as she needs to. But why exactly is Leia still holding on to life? Well, let's just say that she still has a few loose ends to tie, and she definitely intends to tie those up. Poe is called into the medical examiner's office where Leia still is, and Leia explains that she's dying, and that she doesn't have long left, and that she would like to appoint Poe Dameron as the new general of the not the First Order, appoint Poe Dameron as the new general of the Resistance. Poe's naturally distraught at this news. She said that she thought long and hard about this decision and that Poe Dameron was by far and away the best candidate. And eventually, but reluctantly, he just accepts this and says, well, it's your wish. I will become general of the Resistance in the event that you pass away. But Leia isn't gone just yet because she still has one more loose end to tie, and we will see that very soon. Anyway, going back to the Finalizer, or the First Order flagship, we see another meeting between General Hux, Kylo Ren, and all of the high-ranking officers. Except this time, everybody's more in opposition of Kylo Ren. They're saying, you know what, your views don't align with that of the First Order, and you have to run with the will of the officers in the First Order, otherwise you're not speaking for us. But obviously Kylo Ren gets increasingly frustrated, saying that the First Order is outdated and it needs a new vision. And then Hux is like, we need to attack the Resistance, otherwise you're not a good leader for us. And we can see that the Resistance's time is limited because Kylo Ren refuses to attack them, but everybody else on the First Order does, so it's kind of like Kylo Ren just holding back the rest of the First Order from the Resistance for whatever reason that we do not yet know for certain. But then there are a set of words that completely rattle Kylo Ren during this meeting. One of the officers comments how Kylo Ren isn't half the leader that Supreme Leader Snoke ever was, and that's kind of a pun because Supreme Leader Snoke was quite literally cut in half in The Last Jedi. But anyway, these words really hit Kylo Ren where it hurts. After the meeting is dismissed, he goes into his quarters and reminisces about all the times when Supreme Leader Snoke completely tortured him. So we get one in particular where there were actually 7 Knights of Ren rather than 6. and he's forced to kill one of these Knights of Ren because they were traitorous to the First Order. And he tries to do it, but he finds himself unable to kill this seventh knight. But then Snoke tortures him into submission, basically force lightning him, ripping his memories apart, basically just causing every kind of agony he can to Kylo Ren without damaging him physically. And then eventually Kylo Ren submits, just trying to get anything to make the pain stop. So he strikes down the seventh Knight of Ren in the flashback, and then we go back to the present. This current day Kylo Ren is just completely fuming. He's just having a mental breakdown because nothing is going his way at this point. So he just takes out his lightsaber and completely slashes the wall into just molten, just lava and stuff. Just, he goes relentless on this wall. Like, this wall never had a chance. After he's done completely and relentlessly slashing this wall, he stops, calms down, and then slowly, like, inspects his lightsaber blade, which, while it once was completely red, now it has this ever so slight streak of blue. I know that this is probably violating kyber crystal laws, that, like, a lightsaber can't just unbleed itself, but come on. Breaking Bad is allowed to take liberties like this that break what we know to be possible, so I'm allowed to take creative liberties like this, okay? There are slight streaks of blue in his lightsaber, and that is symbolism to say that, quite obviously, he is going, quote, soft. He is turning to the light side ever so slightly. But now we take a look at Hux's perspective after the meeting. He requests one of the officers, who we now know to be Lieutenant Mitaka from The Force Awakens. You know, that really timid officer who told Kylo Ren about the freighter, and then he ends up getting force choked? Yeah, it's that very same guy. I just thought it would be quite nice to bring him back, and he actually has kind of a mini arc in this story, which we'll see play out later on. But Hux wants a confidential meeting scheduled with the Knights of Ren, which confuses Mitaka because the Knights of Ren are Kylo Ren's guards, so it kind of seems suspicious to him. But then Hux just threatens him with a blaster, saying that nobody else is to know of this meeting, and then reluctantly, Mitaka, being the timid guy he is, he goes to actually schedule the meeting just so he doesn't get a blaster bolt in his head. So anyway, we now revisit Rey alone in her quarters on the Resistance base, and she's wrapping up construction of her new lightsaber. And remember how I said there were 2 crystals earlier she retrieved from the cave? Yeah, those are going to be going into 2 separate lightsabers which clip together to form a lightsaber staff. And I feel like this is a very natural progression because obviously she had her quarterstaff on Jakku, and that's what she used to defend herself for 14 years. So it seems like a very natural progression that she would have a lightsaber which is of the same style. So just as she wraps up this construction of the lightsaber, she inserts the 2 kyber crystals in their respective chambers, turns on the 2 blades of the lightsaber, and what do you know, she has a lightsaber staff with purple blades, and it's awesome. She does a little bit of form practice, but then once again the Force decides to be a complete dick and connect her and Ben together. Ben is, like, really rattled at this point. He's just evidently come down from his rage high, and from his wall slashing. So this takes place right after, and he is desperately saying that he can't hold back a war with the Resistance any longer. The people in the First Order are just pushing too hard for it to happen. And he desperately asks her to leave the war behind, go somewhere like the Outer Rim where the First Order won't reach her, so he doesn't have to fight and possibly kill her when the time comes. But Rey's just like, no, I'm not doing that, because I still have friends here who still risk their lives for the cause. And then Ben's like, no, you can't do that, because then I'll have to, like, kill you at some point, and I really don't want to do that. He grows more panicked at this point, but then she tells him, hey, you can still step down as Supreme Leader. I can tell that you're not enjoying your time as Supreme Leader, and then we can rendezvous in the middle, figure something out. But Ben, due to that last part of him clinging to power, claims that he just can't. And he comes up with this flimsy excuse that if he steps down, then somebody like Hux will be in power instead. Of course, he's not lying, but that isn't his main ulterior motive. He doesn't really mind if somebody like Hux is in power. It's just like this kind of argument that just gets plucked out of thin air because it's an excuse he's deflecting. But then Rey shoots these arguments down immediately, telling him outright that he's still trying to cling to his power, rightfully so. Anyway, Rey makes a very accurate analysis, in my opinion. She speculates that the years of abuse, torture, and gaslighting that Ben has experienced under Snoke has made him long for some feeling of power, like wanting to know what true power feels like. And of course, now that he has this power, he's not really enjoying it all that much, but he still wants to cling to it because of that torture, gaslighting, and abuse, or whatever. But anyway, Ben snaps. He says that this is not about what he wants anymore, and he says that he doesn't deserve a peaceful, quiet life after everything he's done, and he once again resorts to desperately pleading her to leave everything behind before it's too late for her. But she's like, nah, I'm sorry, I can't do that, I won't do that. And then the bond just ends. The Force decides to cut them off at the most inconvenient time. But then Rey just turns to leave the room with her new lightsaber in frustration, after their like mini conflicts there. And she sees BB-8 just sitting in the doorway, just staring at her. BB-8 just rolls off as if he saw nothing. And then Rey's just frozen. He's like, how much did that droid see? If he saw Kylo Ren, then I am definitely screwed. Anyway, we switch to Finn, who is in the hangar trying to figure out what a particular connector does when it comes to repairing ships. And he doesn't quite know what he's doing, so he goes to search for Rose. But Rose isn't on base at all, so he gets confused. He asks 3PO where Rose is at, and then 3PO basically tells him that Master Dameron assigned her on a mission that he doesn't quite know the specifics of. We figure out that this particular location that 3PO didn't know is Canto Bight, the same casino town that Rose and Finn caused a mess in during the events of The Last Jedi, and she's searching every dodgy crevice of this decrepit town, or this disgustingly rich town that she can, until she locates the guy from the last episode, you know, DJ, the slicer that betrayed them. She asks him if he can teach her how to slice into Star Destroyer issue equipment, to which the shady man replies by gesturing to her pocket to give him credits. Rose agrees, shelling out all the credits she was carrying. However, she hesitates in handing them all over, asking if she can really trust him. He says truthfully that she can't, but in this case, because he's been given credits, that he will try his best to keep his word, so long as he doesn't need to rat anyone out to live. DJ claims that there is an old Imperial encampment on the city limits and to prepare her brain cells to take notes. Rose is learning from DJ how to slice into First Order equipment, and that will be very important for the final act, keep that in mind. During like the later dinner cafeteria scene, we have a discussion between Poe and Finn. It's like a very friendly heart-to-heart discussion. But anyway, Poe asks Finn if he trusts Rey. And Finn is like, to be honest, I'm not even sure anymore. She's just been hiding so much from me. I don't know what to do about that. And then eventually their conversation concludes. Finn walks away, and then BB-8 rolls up, bumping into Poe's leg to get his attention, and then just keeps beeping at Poe, and then Poe's like, wait a minute, what do you mean that Rey is talking to the wall? So now we go back to Hux, and he's aboard the Finalizer as he walks through stormtrooper-ridden hallways into an abandoned corridor, and the neglect gets clearer and clearer as he goes further deeper into these corridors, which it hints that he's going towards a part of the ship that nobody ever goes to, which further hints that whatever he's doing is very secretive. But anyway, he steps into a decrepit, neglected conference room, and he's greeted by the 6 Knights of Ren. Some of them are even messing with the Force while he talks, so that kind of insinuates that, or kind of foreshadows that, yeah, they're Force sensitive, which is going to be a big deal later on. But then Hux says to these Knights of Ren that he has reason to believe that Kylo Ren is a traitor to the First Order, and then the Knights are like, why am I not surprised? That guy's been having conflict for ages. And then Hux is like, is that so? And then he holds out this hologram type thingy, and this is the file he pulled from the Supremacy earlier, by the way. As a hologram shows in Hux's hand of the throne room fight scene from The Last Jedi, we see clearly that Kylo Ren murdered Snoke, not Rey. It was Kylo Ren who murdered him. And then we get that like kind of intimate elevator scene from The Last Jedi as well, so it kind of shows where his loyalties kind of lie at this point, and then the Knights of Ren are quite immediately grossed out by this, and they were like, yeah, we had a feeling that something as petty as a girl would kind of break him from his dark side focus. Eventually, Hux elaborates that this stuff, this holographic footage, is everything he needs to take down the Supreme Leader Kylo Ren for good and take his place as Supreme Leader. So yeah, Hux has all the Knights of Ren on his side at this point, and he requests them to, when the time is right, apprehend the Supreme Leader, but keep him alive, just knock him unconscious, because Hux, weirdly enough, needs him alive. And then one of the knights asks what to do with the Jedi girl if they capture her, and then Hux says, when the time is right, I will tell you that too. So there's also that little bit in the air still. We kind of know what Hux's motivations are, but not fully. But that kind of mysticism kind of leaves that kind of tension there, like, what is Hux going to do? So anyway, we go back to Rey, who is practicing lightsaber forms in the training room, and we can see in her forms and her, like, stance that she's putting a lot of aggression into her strikes. So that's kind of like an insinuation that she's channeling the dark side of the Force still. But then she's approached by C-3PO and R2-D2, and 3PO tells her that the General wishes to see her in the med bay. And Rey's like, wait, what, the med bay? Like, General Organa is sick? She's like, say no more, fam, and she just rushes past 3PO and R2. And then when she finally reaches the med bay, Leia calls her in almost immediately and dismisses the medical droid from the room. This is kind of suspicious as well, but anyway, the General greets Rey with like some warmth before cutting to the formalities of why she asked Rey to come over. And the General states that she herself is dying, much like the same kind of pep talk that she gave to Poe. And then that makes Rey pretty sad, although not as sad as Poe ever was, because let's face it, Rey only knew the General for a few months at most. But she goes on to say that she knows about the Force bond between Rey and Ben, citing the fact that she can sense her son's presence whenever the Force connects her and Rey. Rey tries to deflect the fact that that she has a Force bond with Leia's son, but then Leia's like, yeah, there is nothing about it that you should be ashamed of, and she's happy that her son isn't completely alone. But then she goes on to say that she is hoping to get the chance to speak with her son one last time before she goes. And then Rey says that the bond connects them completely randomly and that she has no control over it. But Leia nods and asks her if she is willing to wait around until the Force does decide to connect Rey and Ben. So several hours pass before the Force finally links Rey and Ben together in the med bay. Rey touches his shoulder, cementing his physical presence within the Resistance base, because the Force bond kind of has these weird rules that don't really make sense, but they kind of do in their own weird way. So basically, if you touch one another while you're connected, you cement their physical presence. So an example of this is when Rey and Ben touched hands on Octo in Episode 8. Ben was actually physically in that place so Luke can actually see him. Anyway, it's a whole bunch of Force pseudoscience and stuff that it doesn't really need an explanation. Using this weird pseudo-magic of the Force bond, Ben and his mother can now see one another. And then what follows is this extremely heartfelt discussion between mother and son, where Leia tries to tell him that she is sorry for not protecting him from Snoke when she had the chance, telling him that all she ever wanted was for him to be free. But then Ben starts actually crying sorries about the death of Han and the kind of monster he believes himself to have become, saying that it's too late for him. Leia just speaks some sense into him, saying that it's never too late and she forgives him for all of what he did, and that she knows that if Han was still alive that he would have forgiven Ben as well. Eventually she lets go once she said all she wanted to say, all she wanted to pep talk Ben about, and then she dissolves into the Force. She becomes one with the Force, a Force ghost like Luke did. I'm trying to think, yeah, like Yoda did, like Obi-Wan did. She just disappears into the Force. And then Ben is like really sad about this. And then he basically hugs Rey tight, cries into her shoulder just for that little bit of comfort. But yeah, it's like a really ugly cry because he was not ready to witness all of this. Ben is ugly crying into Rey's shoulder for like, what, 5 minutes before the Force decides to like sever the connection and just leave Rey completely alone in the medbay to process everything she's just seen. And weirdly enough, she just seems at peace. She can sense that Ben's lighter side is coming to the surface, and she's really happy about that. But from Ben's perspective, like light years away, he pulls his lightsaber from across the room and ignites it and inspects it once more. And we can see, like, the blade is now like a violent mix of red and blue. Like, it's not just small streaks of blue here and there, it's like equal proportions red and blue. But eventually, these streaks of red and blue stop fighting each other, and then they form like a perfect, well, not perfect, it's still like a really serrated lightsaber blade, but it basically the color merges and it turns into a deep purple blade, the exact same shade as Rey's lightsaber. But anyway, Leia has a funeral. I'm not sure if this is like 100% essential to add, but I feel like Leia should have more of a send-off than just a singular scene. So she has her funeral scene, where in the memoriam speech, Poe says that Leia was like a mother to him, and like he's devastated that she's gone. But based on the fact that he's been bestowed general, he will try his best to carry the resistance to victory for her sake. But more than anything, this is just to serve as like a separator between two consecutive Force bond scene. Because Rey and Ben are gonna have their fourth, and believe it or not, final Force bond scene. Ben is still like really emotional from his mother's death, and he tells Rey stories from his childhood about how he remembered Leia, saying that sometimes she loved her New Republic a little bit too much, sometimes more than she loved him, which is deeply tragic, but that's like kind of a little tidbit about how involved Leia was in her work for the New Republic. And he ultimately decides that Leia's legacy can't have been to pass away fighting for a cause that would ultimately lose in the end, and that she's lost way too much in her own life for that. And with that observation, he vows to do as much damage to the First Order as he can, which is kind of like a declaration that he's turning from the dark side permanently, or at least turning away from the First Order specifically. He places a data drive into Rey's palm, saying that it is a detailed schematic of the finalizer, telling her to just deliver it to whoever is now in charge in the Resistance. Rey's worried for him. She's saying, don't go and fight, you might die, this is basically a suicide mission. And Ben stops her and he's like, yeah, I know, this will probably kill me, but it's definitely worth a shot. And he goes on to say that this is the least he can do for all the damage that he's done. Rey tries to bring up her bargaining chip from earlier, because you know how Ben said that like he wants her to like run away from the war. She's just like, hey, why don't you come with me? Like, come on, let's run away from the war together. Just don't go do something stupid and get yourself killed by the First Order. But then he manages like a small smile that doesn't reach his eyes, and he just says, we'll do that after. But anyway, before he goes, him and Rey embrace in like a less mournful hug. This is more of like a loving hug, because yes, Reylo is happening. Screw you, Josh, I am adding Reylo into the story. But anyway, I digress. but it's pretty clear at this point that they have a thing for each other, and that's going to be important to know later on. However, right now, like in the present, we need shit to go completely awry. So Poe walks into the room while they're hugging, and he sees the Supreme Leader just disappear from view. And he's just like mortified at this, that Rey's hugging the Supreme Leader of the First Order, and she realizes all too late that she's been found out and that Poe is really mad. But anyway, let's lift our attention off of that for a moment. We are now following Ben as he prepares to do some real damage to the First Order. He grabs his now like deep purple lightsaber and just storms out of his quarters into the complex hallways of the Supremacy. And he interrogates a few officers as to where Hux is. They refuse to tell him. He initially like slips into that dark side of force choking them for answers, but then he realizes, no, that just doesn't feel right anymore. Like, that just feels cruel and mean, so he just doesn't do that. But we see Hux observing Kylo Ren through live security feeds across multiple displays, showing that, like, yeah, Hux is on top of this. But yeah, we go back to the Resistance base, just leave us on that cliffhanger there, and Rey is in deep shit. She's getting interrogated by the big players of the Resistance, so Poe, Finn, Rose, like, all of them are just railing on her, throwing accusations, more of them than she could possibly respond to. And it just makes a confusing wall of noise which she just tries to avoid. Anyway, going back to Ben, he rounds a corner back on the finalizer, and he finds that a hallway far down the line is completely blocked by 3 of the Knights of Ren. All 3 of them are wielding the threatening-looking weapons that they were seen holding in The Force Awakens, and he's like, oh, I don't want any part of that. So he turns around to retreat, only to be greeted with the other 3 knights. He is completely trapped, he has no way out. So a close quarter fight ensues, Ben with his purple lightsaber versus all 6 Knights of Ren, who are all Force sensitive. So yeah, this isn't going to be a very fair fight. He snags one of their arms on his lightsaber blade, but that doesn't really do any real damage to any of them. But yeah, eventually the fight ends when one of them smacks him out cold with their staff, and drags him into like an interrogation room. But yeah, while Rey is just getting completely railed and interrogated by every member of the Resistance ever, she just feels this blunt force trauma hit her from the other side of the bond, and she realizes that Ben is in deep shit right now. He just got hit round the head by something hard. Anyway, we go back to Ben's unconscious body where one of the Knights of Ren just places some force restraining cuffs around his wrists, and that completely severs his connection to the Force, which means that Rey can't sense his presence in the Force anymore through the bond. So she interprets that as being that Ben just died. Even though he didn't, he's still very much alive, but Rey thinks that he's died. And she's just completely grief-stricken at the moment. Like, she's at the brink of breaking down. She tries to excuse herself from the room where people in the Resistance are still yelling at her, and then Poe stops her, saying that she is not permitted to leave and that she's under arrest. But then, overwhelmed by the sudden grief of Ben, she just lashes out, launching Poe out of her way with like a shock of Force lightning. If you don't know what Force lightning is, that's like some real dark side shit. And she realizes, oh shit, I just blasted one of my comrades with Force lightning, and that like, oh, I'm in real deep shit now. So she just charges out of the door. Finn and Rose pick Poe off of the ground, who is still stunned by the blast. He's still got like a bit of smoke coming off of his jacket where she just blasted him. But then he urges both of them not to chase her, or she could do far worse to any of them because she's far more powerful than any of them can possibly imagine. But anyway, Rey escapes the Resistance base by taking one of the junker ships in the hangar, just zooming way out of range of the base completely. So anyway, we revisit Ben, who is still alive, by the way, but he is strapped to like some random interrogation chair in the middle of like the finalizer. He doesn't have any idea where he is. He's never seen this room in his life. But what he does notice is that Hux is standing before him, like towering over him. And Hux begins to taunt him about his pathetic attempt to sink the Order, But Ben retorts with insults of how terrible of a leader Hux will be, saying that he only knows how to destroy. Hux, having a major ego, is just really pissed off at these words, and then he just resorts to physically beating Ben senseless with like some hardback leather gloves. And then like this causes some massive bruising around Ben's face and stomach. But Ben just takes this beating like a champ, managing to stay calm through it all. Ben asks Hux casually of like what he could possibly gain by keeping Ben alive at that current time. But Hux responds by saying that a blaster to the head is far too humane for the pain and humiliation that Ben has caused Hux, and that Kylo Ren's death has to be slow and painful. Ben gets cocky at this, asking how he's going to manage to torture somebody who has absolutely nothing left to lose. But this is when the Hux turns the tables on him, and this is where we get the true dread of the pain that Hux can inflict upon him. He shows Ben the holograms he pulled from the supremacy of him and Rey on the day of Snoke's death, and then Ben is like, oh shit, he knows about that. He knows that I have a connection to Rey. He knows I killed Snoke. And oh damn, he knows that I definitely have something to lose now. But then Hux basically says in the most sinister way possible that he will make him watch as he slowly kills Rey right in front of him, like slowly and painfully, and he will grant Ben the mercy of death only when there are no more tears left to shed. Basically some really dark torture porn shit, but whatever. Ben hits full denial mode, saying that Rey will never come for him, that she will be long gone, like far away from the war, the order, and she will be like vibing somewhere in the Outer Rim. But Hux just leaves him to stew on like the pain of like the revelation that he just got. So when Hux is just completely gone, he tries desperately to call out to Rey with the Force, just to tell her to stay the hell away, but, you know, the Force restraining cuffs he's still got on, they're preventing him from being able to do that, so Rey is completely oblivious that Ben is currently still alive and being tortured, so as far as she's concerned, she's got nothing left to lose either. But anyway, this is the point where we start to bridge the second act to the third, and every Resistance member that is still on base is around the meeting table with Poe Dameron sitting at the head. Some of the Resistance members speculate that they're screwed because Rey is like evil now, and Rey knows for sure where they are and stuff like that, like some real conspiracy level shit. But some others are saying that they've just lost their best fighter and their best hope at liberating the galaxy because Poe scared her off or whatever. So it's like a very divisive environment as it is. Poe, Rose, and Finn just look completely and utterly resigned. They're like, oh, I'm so done with this already. I haven't even been general for a day, and I'm just done with this. But then they have no time to mope as Connix breaks through the crowd, saying that there is a galaxy-wide transmission from the First Order itself. And Poe's like, wait, what? So he switches the holotable to pick up the broadcast, only to find Hux standing formally. Hux states that the Supreme Leader has been executed for high treason, and that his values were at odds of the core values of the First Order. Hux proclaims himself as the new acting Supreme Leader of the First Order with a mission statement of reclaiming the galaxy from Ren's attempt of diplomacy. The entire Resistance are just shocked by this, by the time this transmission cuts out, and nobody knows what to say. But eventually one of them in the crowd points out that Hux was the sole mind behind Starkiller Base, and that he has no master to keep him on a leash anymore. He has no Snoke to stop him from going all out, he has no Kylo Ren to stop him from making another Starkiller, so basically whatever he decides to do, oh boy, the galaxy's gonna be screwed if Hux is allowed to stay in power for much longer. And Poe agrees with everything that this random fighter says, saying that a battle is closer than they all initially anticipated, that they need to kill Hux as soon as possible. Finn claims that they need a battle plan right this second or else the galaxy is screwed, but then eventually Rose timidly steps forward, planting a data drive into Poe's hand, saying that Rey dropped it while she fled the base and that she had no knowledge of it prior. Anyway, Poe hands it to BB-8, who scans it for viruses. BB-8 is done scanning it for viruses. He declares that it's a perfectly clean data drive. So he plugs it into the holotable, and what materializes is, as Ben said earlier, a complete schematic of the entire First Order flagship. Rose explained that she didn't show this earlier because she wasn't sure that she could trust whatever was on it. But of course, now they know they absolutely can. Poe finishes by saying that if Rey has this and her and Kylo Ren are as close as he believes them to be, then it's very likely that these schematics are legitimate. Then we jump into like a small interlude as everybody discusses this newfound information amongst themselves, and Finn uses this opportunity to tell Poe that he wants to step back on field, back into the fight, help out wherever he can. And he says he believes himself to be ready. So yeah, Finn's gonna be deployed right back on field. We go back to Hux, who is at the command bridge on the Finalizer, ready to enact the second phase of his plan. And the Knights of Ren are ready, standing at the command bridge as well, awaiting Hux's command. He receives like a communication from a random officer, who we don't actually know, and this officer is like super panicked. He's like, the Jedi girl is here, she's on this ship. And then we hear the man just get brutally slashed apart with a lightsaber blade, and then the feral screams of Rey on the other side as she just goes ham with a lightsaber, murdering everyone. But then Hux turns to the Knights of Ren, who are awaiting orders, and he says, yeah, the time has now come for Phase 2, because Rey is here and she's just murdering everyone. But anyway, we see the other end of this commotion as a huge action set piece ensues that, in my vision, aims to like kind of encapsulate the frantic energy of the Kingsman Church sequence and the pure, unbridled horror of the warehouse scene from Batman v Superman. I want to make Rey like this character to be completely feared, especially when she's channeling the dark side. So she's in completely black robes, like kind of symbolizing that she's like mourning the death of Ben. But she's just mercilessly slashing over 100 stormtroopers down in like varying and completely brutal ways, in just like a fit of rage. But yeah, this scene will have absolutely everything, this just lightsaber murder rampage. It's got decapitations, force head crushings, stormtrooper kebabs, stormtrooper meat shields, lightsaber boomerang action, just everything you can think of. Every badass action that you could possibly think of that's unique, that's never been done before in Star Wars. You would bet that Rey would figure out to use her lightsaber staff this way, but basically, the essence is that she's just completely slaughtering a room full of stormtroopers with absolutely no physical damage to her. But anyway, she reaches the command bridge within like quite a short amount of time afterwards, and you would think at this point, oh dang, Hux is just screwed. You've got a completely feral Rey about to slash him down. He's on the command bridge, she's on the command bridge, he is going down. But anyway, she just charges at this, at Hux, but she finds out, much similar to the battle on Crate, she just charges straight through him. She turns around and realizes that this Hux is not a real Hux at all. He's a force projection. Does that mean Hux is force sensitive? No, it does not, because she turns around and realizes that four or five members of the Knights of Ren are all pooling their force energy together to project an image of Hux. And then when they're done, this image of Hux just dissolves out of view, and then four of the Knights of Ren just collapse in exhaustion. She slowly turns around to realize, wait, there's probably somebody around, like, behind me, and then she's right, there is a fifth Knight of Ren who just, like they did with Ben, who just whacks her unconscious with, like, a mallet. We go back to the Resistance, who have now, like, formed a complete battle plan. They've all determined that once they enter the Finalizer, which Rose will help them enter with her newfound slicing skills she learned off of DJ, they will all go down their separate routes in groups of 2 or 3, go down predetermined routes as shown in the schematics, and they will all eventually meet in the middle, or meet at the command bridge where they take control of the flagship and then divide and conquer to get the rest of the smaller ones. Poe claims that they've endured several devastating events in the last few days, but he is absolutely confident that they can pull through enough like they managed to during the Battle of Starkiller and just completely eliminate the First Order once and for all. It is with this that everybody departs from the command table and all file into separate ships. Chewie takes the Falcon along with Rose, Finn, and Connix, while Poe takes one of the 3 Junker ships. All in all, 4 ships depart from the base and towards the battle. We're now at the point where Rey wakes up with an absolutely throbbing headache to find herself strapped to an interrogation chair, much like Ben was earlier. And due to her blurry vision and ringing ears, she can't quite tell what's going on just yet. So eventually her vision clears enough for her to realize that the sound that she's hearing and the person she's seeing is Ben Solo just screaming at somebody she can't quite see just yet, to let her go and just set her free. But she's not focused on this. She's just focused on the fact that Ben's still alive. She's just laughing with many, many tears of joy, exclaiming that he's alive. But eventually she sobers up when she realizes that Hux is standing off to the side, and she's like, oh shit, I know what's going on. But Ben is still verbally assaulting Hux to let her go. But instead, Hux mocks Ben, asking him whether or not she is the famed Snoke killer, and it's clear that he is greatly enjoying Ben's suffering already at this point. He resorts to just completely beating up Rey in the same way he did Ben with these hard-backed leather gloves, just leaving her wheezing and trying to carry a proper breath afterwards. She's just completely winded from the beating that she received from Hux. But then she just spits blood at Hux's feet in response. She's got the same amount of defiance she had in the throne room, and that just amuses Hux to a great degree. But then he's stopped as he is about to repeat the process again, because he receives an alert of a small fleet of ships breaking from hyperspace on his communicator device. He sighs, saying that he would rather save more of the fun till later when he's got no more baggage to work with. And so he just leaves Ben and Rey just both strapped to their respective interrogation chairs, just waiting for their inevitable deaths. This is when we get a scene of Ben and Rey both admitting their regrets, such as choosing not to be with the other person when they had the chance to. Ben supposes that they will still be together after death if the Force wills it so, but Rey's unwilling to accept that they're both going to die. And then Rey's about to confess something more, but Ben stops her, saying that it will only hurt more to hear when the inevitable happens. But then his words are just completely broken when the interrogation door just whirs open back up, revealing Lieutenant Mitaka from earlier, the one that Hux just threatened earlier with a blaster. He quickly states that Hux will be informed in a matter of seconds that they're being broken out and they need to get out of here fast. He releases their restraints with a card that he has on him, causing them both to fall to the ground. But instead of what most normal people would do, run out of the door before any stormtroopers come, before the Knights of Ren come, before Hux himself comes, and they just completely clamber into each other's arms, holding each other tight, and then this is where they admit that they love one another, in what would be a really touching moment if they weren't in a murder torture room. Mitaka reminds them as much, throwing their lightsabers at them, telling them to get the hell out of the room. Ben asks Mitaka why he's helping, and Mitaka replies that there is only one true Supreme Leader, and that he made the mistake in following Hux. Mitaka salutes Ben, but then he takes out a blaster and rushes into a nearby corridor to buy them some time. We hear a bunch of blaster fire in this corridor, but it ceases quickly, leading us to assume that either Mitaka killed a bunch of stormtroopers, or a bunch of stormtroopers killed Mitaka. So anyway, what was this whole thing about a small fleet of ships breaking from hyperspace? Well, we quickly learn that the supposed ships that left hyperspace nearby were belonging to none other than the Resistance fleet themselves. Finn urgently asks Rose if she's practiced the slicing technique well enough and that she knows what she's doing. But she says, yeah, I'm pretty sure I know what I'm doing. But she is slicing away quick, but not quick enough. A band of TIE fighters approach, they broke out of the hangar bay and they're coming right for them. And Finn asks her more urgently to hurry up, but like this scene gets really stressful really quickly. But then finally, Rose admits that she did it. She managed to slice the security of the First Order, meaning that they can gain entrance to the hangar bay. The Falcon and two of the junker ships were quick enough to get into the hangar bay, but then the third one wasn't so lucky because that one got shredded by a bunch of TIE fighters. So there is a bit of war casualty here. So everybody on board their respective junker ships or the Falcon as quick as possible just gathered their weapons and just stormed out of their respective ships, just blasting away at stormtroopers and the like. Finn and Rose go down their route, Poe and Chewie go down their route, all while blaster fire just rains all over the place. But anyway, we follow a particular shootout between Chewie and Poe and a small squadron of stormtroopers, and this is an easy wipeout for them. As a little continuity nugget, Finn notices that the ship Rey stole earlier is still in the particular hangar they landed. But anyway, I digress. Their route is pretty much devoid of stormtroopers for a little while, luckily for Finn, until one comes out of nowhere. Finn just freezes like a deer in headlights instead of fighting back, so Rose had to do the killing action on that stormtrooper. Finn realizes real quick, yeah, I'm really not over that whole stormtrooper thing, am I? But he says that he can't just keep doing this. Like, he's just regressed back to how he was earlier, and this is not good for him. But then we kind of see like a metaphorical light bulb light up over Finn's head as he gets an idea. He asks Rose if he recalls on the schematic where the nearest communication room was, and Rose eventually states that it's a few halls down after doing a bit of mental gymnastics. But then she claims with a warning that it's kind of off route from where they're meant to be. But Finn's like, yeah, it doesn't matter, I've got a really good idea. Finn and Rose both charge over to where this communication room is meant to be. They set their blasters to stun, slice the communication room door open, and stun everybody in the room, every officer in the room. And then they throw the stun men out, lock the door, and Rose does her slicing technique again to hack into the speakers aboard every Star Destroyer in the area. So now everybody, no matter which Star Destroyer they're on, they will hear Finn talk. She nods her confirmation to Finn, saying that he's all Gucci, he's all good to go. But then he awkwardly begins a speech that is heard across every room in every Star Destroyer. The essence of the speech is that he was a defective stormtrooper, and that he realized all too late that the Order don't care about the little guys, they're just a statistic, a cog in the machine, to push the Order's nefarious agenda forward. He asks rhetorically why they're all fighting really, because fighting for the Order isn't really living, it's just existing. He encourages them all to rise up against their oppressors, and take back the lives of them and their comrades. Reactions to this speech vary greatly. Rey is completely elated. Ben just doesn't care. Poe and Chewie are yelling their approval to nobody at all. And Hux is just yelling to those on the bridge to sever the signal immediately. We see in every Star Destroyer that uprisings are beginning to happen, with the defected stormtroopers rising up and removing their helmets in protest, shooting down the high-ranking officers. A squadron of defectors troops everywhere are being slaughtered by the Knights of Ren as they try to actually fight the Knights of Ren. Bad idea, by the way, they're force sensitive, don't do that. But anyway, Finn and Rose leave the communications room where they are greeted and trapped in by a squad of helmeted stormtroopers. This is quickly remedied when a defected squadron ambush the helmeted squadron from behind, who immediately identify Finn as Commander FN-2187. Finn and Rose lead this savior squadron into battle, down the route that they initially intended to go before Finn got his big light bulb idea. Poe and Chewie enter the same large room where a dark-side Rey did her absolute stormtrooper carnage earlier, and Poe quips that Rey is definitely on their side at the very least. They go through this room and enter a tight corridor with a sharp turn. Chewie rounds this corner first, and Poe doesn't actually see what's going on, but Chewie immediately strikes somebody off screen on the other end of that turn. A man can be heard gasping for breath as Rey's voice yells at Chewie, and then Poe rounds a corner to find that Chewie just punched Ben in the throat. Anyway, Rey just helps Ben off of the ground, who is still like coughing and spluttering from the throat punch. And Rey just assumes that they are after General Hux, which Poe confirms, by the way. But it's shut up by like a disgruntled Ben telling him firmly that Hux is their kill and their kill alone. But anyway, I digress. Ben and Rey continue along their original path while Poe and Chewie continue on theirs. Poe comments on how intense they seem, causing Chewie to laugh in Wookiee. Poe and Chewie meet a stormtrooper squad mid-battle as they join in right on the action. Eventually, Finn, Poe, and Rose and a load of stormtroopers and Chewie all meet at the rendezvous point outside the command bridge. They all anticipate a massive shootout within the bridge, and hopefully the death of Hux too. However, they are left greatly disappointed to find that Hux and all the other officers fled ages ago. Poe commands them to split up and find Hux. At some point, Poe chooses to sacrifice his life as one of the Stormtrooper Revolt clan turns on them, and he asks Finn to take care of BB-8 for him in this moment. So, yeah, Poe dies. I'm not really sure exactly how that would work into the story, but that's always been part of the vision, Poe dying. But yeah, Poe sacrificing himself has always been part of the story. It's kind of why I never included a Finn Poe subplot, you know, Storm Pilot, the romance between Finn and Poe. I never included that because I knew I wanted Poe to sacrifice himself at one point, and this Star Wars film is meant to be uplifting, not necessarily a tragedy. So anyway, we reach the final fight. Ben and Rey have successfully traced Hux over to a large room where they find themselves surrounded by the 6 Knights of Ren as they emerge from the only 2 exits of the room. What transpires next is a huge final battle between the 6 Knights and Team Reylo. Rey and Ben, much like last time, fight in complete unison. They're just kicking ass, slaughtering the 6 Knights with varying degrees of brutality. And given its similarities in nature to the throne room fight of The Last Jedi, I think I need to add a few more things to spice this one up, make it more unique than just throne room fight v2. But only one of them sustains an injury throughout this stretch, as one of the knights dislocates Rey's knee with a well-placed kick. And then this same knight tries to go for a headshot with their mallet while Rey is on the ground, which definitely would have killed her, by the way, but they are cut off from this action by Ben throwing his lightsaber through the knight's head, instantly killing it. But anyway, she immediately limps her way back into something of a standing position, but quickly realizes while looking at Ben that Hux has entered the room and is definitely about to land a killing shot on Ben with a blaster. Rey, in panic, wrenches the blaster from Hux's hand with the Force, audibly fracturing the man's wrist as he pulls the trigger, but except the blaster bolt, instead of hitting Ben, hits Rey in the shoulder. Anyway, this pisses off Rey even more. She lifts Hux several meters above the ground in rage, and then throws him really hard against a support pillar, which completely severs Hux's spinal cord. So Hux is now paralyzed from the waist down, completely out of the fight. So yeah, now the room is just in complete silence. Hux is just out unconscious. The 6 Knights of Ren are completely dead. And they turn to face each other. Ben closes most of the distance because he doesn't have a dislocated knee. Rey limps a little bit of the way through, covering the rest of the ground. So then we finally get a genuine full smile from Ben from like the first time ever on screen. And it's then where we're able to get like their first actual kiss. And it's a pretty long kiss because I found it oddly fitting for one of the most savage couples of all time to have a first kiss among a pile of dead bodies. I know. It's just that right tone of darkness that we have right there. But anyway, we focus now on the paralyzed from the waist down Hux, who tries to desperately crawl towards a blaster on the floor in a futile attempt to shoot Rey and Ben dead. But he's stopped by a random boot crushing his hand, causing even more damage. The person in question steals the blaster from reach, and that person that stumped on Hux's hand is revealed to be Finn. Finn calls out for Kylo Ren, asking if he wants to do the honors, referencing the helpless Hux on the floor, but Ben ultimately shakes his head, saying that the kill is all his. So it's kind of like this micro character arc within the final act itself. But anyway, Finn nods and shoots Hux dead with a single blaster bolt to the head before he tosses the blaster to the ground. He reminds Ben that he's a wanted man, that if he comes back with the Resistance or steps foot anywhere but Outer Rim territory again, there will be crimes to pay for. Finn also says the same to an extent is true for Rey, but she's not guilty of much, really. Rey says that they're okay right where they are with a smile as she looks up to Ben, who smiles back. So it's like this kind of sweet romantic moment, and then Finn is like, yeah, okay, and then he leaves, once again leaving them to bask in the glory of all their kills, their victory, and finally having the chance to be free with each other. We see Finn arrive back at the Junker fleet where Rose, Chewie, and many of the other Resistance fighters await further instructions. He announces that Hux and the Knights of Ren are dead with responses of cheers and whistles of victory. But then Rose asks where Rey is, and Finn simply says that she's where she wants to be. And that answer's enough for Rose. All of the ships take off, including the Falcon, as they all jump to hyperspace, leaving Rey and Ben on the Ravage Finalizer pretty much alone. It's revealed that all the other ships have been absolutely annihilated by Stormtrooper uprisings as well, so they didn't need to be invaded in the end after all. We see a bunch of TIE fighters and Imperial shuttles join the Resistance in scattering themselves away from the battlefield, and it's safe to assume that all of these involve defected Stormtroopers. This is when a few people decided to stay behind, as they decide to use like the hyperspace ramming that we saw in The Last Jedi. So we get this like epic show of all the Star Destroyers just hyperspace ramming each other, most of them targeting the big boy, the Finalizer. It causes like an immense amount of damage, and at this point we never see Rey or Ben leave, so ultimately we don't really know what happened to them at this point. We see a time jump of maybe a year or so. We join Finn in a Stormtrooper specialized group therapy session on Coruscant, and he supports a bunch of Stormtroopers telling their stories of their time within the First Order, their lives post-Order, as some speak of finding love, finding jobs, just getting on with normal life. They talk about their struggles, like how they struggle to sleep at night, but Finn supports them through all of it. His workday sees him working alongside Rose at a speeder repair shop that the two of them ended up opening together, and their shop is actually pretty busy too. There's also a little memorial in the corner where BB-8 usually spends most of his time, which has a picture of Poe Dameron on it, honoring his sacrifice. So while they're working on repairing a speeder, Rose comments to Finn that apparently there's been this big attack on Canto Bight, the casino world that they were on in The Last Jedi, and that the culprits were two unidentified figures, one male, one female. And then Finn is just smiling at this because he knows exactly who that could be. The hints that Rey and Ben are still alive. But anyway, everything closes up. The very final shot we see is Rey and Ben liberating, that Force-sensitive child, in Canto Bight, who we see pull the broom to his hand, Broom Boy. So yeah, the very final thing we see is Rey holding out her hand to this little kid, this little Force-sensitive kid, which hints that they're starting a new Jedi Order together, which is, is pretty epic. So that's it. That's my definitive ending of the Skywalker saga. Yeah, it's not perfect. This is like a third draft. Like, there's still some imperfections, some little quirks that I need to figure out, some pacing issues that would need to be addressed. But ultimately, this is everything I would have ever wanted to see from an Episode 9 of Star Wars. Yeah, the plot just slugs in the beginning. There's, no real threat that we see. But I kind of get the same sense from Endgame, but I still loved Endgame anyway. I love that kind of slow burn, just basking in the aftermath of the previous film. And it occurred to me that you don't really need a threatening villain right off the bat. You can just live in the world for a bit before you actually bring in who the actual villain is. So yeah, my recording might be a bit jumbled. I've been recording for 2 hours now. There is a lot of footage for me to cut down. But yeah, this is what I would have wanted to see from an Episode 9. If you agreed with some of the choices I made, if you disagreed with them, please let me know down in the comments below. That would help me massively for my next screenwriting project, which I'm actually planning to develop fully rather than just leave it a second or third draft. I actually second guessed myself while writing this, and I actually went off on a tangent and wrote an entirely new story, like entirely different episode 9, but then I ultimately decided that this episode 9 that I had written fits with every character a bit better, even if it lacks that sense of urgency that you would expect from a finale.